crying, Mason. Stop it right now." Victoria Thornton grabbed her 2-year-old son's arm and yanked him toward her. The child screamed, his small body twisting in agony as she forced another button through its hole. "You're ruining everything. The photographer is waiting and you will not embarrass me today." She pulled the designer jacket tighter across his small chest, ignoring how he gasped for breath. "Megan, hold him still. I need this to be perfect." But what Victoria didn't know, what no one in that Manhattan penthouse understood, was that every button she fastened, every zipper she pulled tight, every seam she pressed against his soft skin, was slowly destroying her son's spine. Day after day, the damage grew worse, and it would take a black cleaning woman with nothing to lose to discover the horrifying truth hidden on that baby's leg. Before we continue this incredible story, I want to ask you something. What city are you watching from right now? Drop a comment below. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. And if you believe in stories about courage and doing what's right, even when everything is against you, please subscribe to our channel and stay with me until the very end. Trust me, what happens next will shake you to your core. Rosetta Williams pressed her back against the elevator wall and closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. 47 floors. She was about to step into a world she had only seen in magazines, and every instinct told her she didn't belong there. The elevator doors opened. She forced herself to step forward, and her worn shoes, the ones she had resoled twice because new ones weren't in the budget, squeaked against the marble floor. "You're late." Rosetta's head snapped up. A woman stood at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, eyes cold. Blonde hair without a single strand out of place. A dress that probably cost more than Rosetta's rent for 6 months. Diamonds on every finger. Victoria Thornton. The face from the magazine covers. The fashion icon. The woman whose empire was built on making other people feel inadequate. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The subway was delayed and I don't care about your subway." Victoria walked closer, her heels striking the marble like a judge's gavel. "When I say 9 o'clock, I mean 9 o'clock. Not 9:03, not 9:01, 9. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am. It won't happen again." Victoria circled her, slowly examining her the way someone might examine a stain on expensive fabric. "The agency said you were reliable. They said you were thorough. They said you knew how to follow instructions." "I do, ma'am." "Then prove it." Victoria stopped directly in front of her. "This penthouse represents my brand. Every surface must be flawless. Every corner must be perfect. You will work quietly. You will stay invisible. You will not speak to my family unless spoken to. And you will never under any circumstances disturb my son or his nanny. Is that clear?" Rosetta felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice soft. "Crystal clear." "Good." Victoria checked her phone, already dismissing her. "Start with the living room. I have a Vogue shoot here next week, and if I see a single fingerprint on any surface, you'll be gone before lunch." She swept past Rosetta without another word, leaving behind the scent of perfume that probably cost more than Rosetta made in a week. Rosetta exhaled slowly. She needed this job. God, she needed this job. Her daughter Destiny was 3 months away from graduating Columbia University with a nursing degree. The tuition bills arrived like clockwork, each one a reminder of how much was riding on Rosetta's tired shoulders. And her mother, Grandma Ella, was 78 years old, with a heart that was getting weaker every day. The medication alone cost $400 a month. She couldn't afford to make mistakes here. She couldn't afford to have feelings. She couldn't afford to be anything except invisible. So she picked up her cleaning supplies and got to work. The living room was massive, but Rosetta didn't let herself be intimidated. She had cleaned houses for 30 years. Rich people, poor people, everyone in between. A floor was a floor. Dirt was dirt. The only difference was the attitude of the people who lived there. She was on her knees polishing the base of a coffee table that probably cost more than her car when she heard it. A sound that made her hands stop moving. A sound that made her whole body go still. Crying. Not the angry screaming of a toddler who wanted a toy. Not the frustrated whining of a child who didn't get his way. This was different. This was the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep, the kind that said something was wrong, really wrong. Rosetta closed her eyes. Her daughter had made that exact sound 30 years ago when an ear infection went undiagnosed for 3 weeks. She had taken Destiny to 2 different doctors, and both of them had told her the baby was fine, just fussy, just difficult. But Rosetta had known. A mother always knows. By the time the 3rd doctor finally listened, Destiny had permanent hearing loss in her left ear. Rosetta never forgave herself for not fighting harder. The crying from upstairs continued muffled but persistent. She tried to focus on her work. It wasn't her business. Victoria had been clear. Stay invisible. Don't disturb the family. She was just the cleaning woman. Who would listen to her anyway? But the sound wouldn't stop. It pulled at something deep in her chest, something she couldn't ignore no matter how hard she tried. She stood slowly and moved toward the staircase, pretending to examine the railing for dust. The crying grew louder as she climbed. "I said stop it, Mason," a woman's voice from behind a closed door. Young, annoyed, exhausted. "There's nothing wrong with you. You're just being difficult." The child's sobs grew more desperate. "Oh my God, seriously, I can't deal with this right now. Just stop." A door flew open. A young woman emerged, maybe 25, pretty in a hard-edged way. She was wearing expensive athleisure clothes and had her phone pressed to her ear. "No, I can totally meet you for drinks later," she said into the phone, walking past Rosetta without even glancing at her. "I just need to get out of this place. This kid is driving me absolutely insane." She disappeared down the stairs, her voice fading. "I know, right? They pay me $70,000 a year to babysit, and honestly, it's not worth it. He never stops crying. Never. I've tried everything." Rosetta stood frozen on the landing. Behind the door, the nanny had just abandoned a child was crying alone. Every instinct screamed at her to go to him, to pick him up, to hold him, to tell him someone cared. But she thought about Destiny's tuition, about Grandma Ella's medication, about the electric bill and the rent, and all the things that depended on her keeping this job. She turned and walked back downstairs. The guilt felt like swallowing broken glass. For the next 3 hours, Rosetta cleaned. She scrubbed bathrooms and polished fixtures and wiped down surfaces that were already spotless. She worked mechanically, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind stayed fixed on that crying child upstairs. Around noon, she heard the elevator arrive. "The investors want an answer by Friday." A man's voice, deep and distracted. "I can't keep stalling them." "Then handle it, Harrison." Victoria's voice, sharp as a blade. "I have Milan to prepare for. I can't deal with your drama right now." "My drama? Your last collection almost bankrupted us, Victoria. Don't you dare start with me. Not today. Not after the morning I've had." Rosetta kept her head down, dusting a bookshelf, making herself as small and invisible as possible. Harrison Thornton walked past her like she was furniture. Tall, handsome, in a generic way, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But his attention was glued to his phone, his thumbs moving constantly, his eyes never leaving the screen. Victoria followed, dropping her designer bag on a table. Her face was tight with irritation. Then the crying started again, louder this time, more desperate. Victoria's expression went cold. "What now?" She marched toward the stairs. Harrison followed, still typing. Rosetta shouldn't have moved. She knew she shouldn't have moved, but her feet carried her to the base of the staircase anyway. She could hear everything. "What's wrong with him?" Victoria's voice. "I don't know, Mrs. Thornton." The nanny, defensive. "He's been like this all day. I've tried everything." "Then try harder. That's literally why I pay you." "I have tried. He just won't stop." "Maybe we should call the doctor again." Harrison's voice uncertain. "We've called 3 doctors, Harrison. They all say the same thing. Growing pains, developmental differences. He'll grow out of it." Victoria exhaled sharply. "I don't have time for this. The Fashion Week committee is waiting for my call." The crying grew louder, so desperate it made Rosetta's chest ache. "Put him in his crib," Victoria said flatly. "Let him cry it out. Maybe he'll learn that tantrums don't get him anywhere in this house." "Victoria, maybe we should—" "Handle your investors, Harrison. I'll handle my son," Footsteps, a door closing. Then Victoria descended the stairs, phone already at her ear, voice instantly bright and cheerful. "Darling, so sorry for the delay. Now about the Milan show. I have the most fabulous ideas for the children's collection. Mason will be featured prominently. The photographers absolutely adore him. He's so photogenic, so professional for his age." She walked past Rosetta like she didn't exist. Upstairs, the crying continued. Rosetta gripped her dusting cloth so tight her knuckles went white. Professional. Victoria had just called her 2-year-old son professional. What kind of mother talked about her baby that way? The afternoon crawled by. Rosetta cleaned room after room, but she couldn't escape the sound. That crying, that heartbroken, exhausted, hopeless crying that drifted down from the second floor, no matter where she went. Around 2 o'clock, the crying finally stopped. The silence was somehow worse. At 4 o'clock, Rosetta found herself in the upstairs hallway, supposedly polishing a mirror, but really positioning herself where she could see through the nursery door, which someone had left slightly open. Her breath caught. A small boy sat on a plush rug in the middle of the room, Mason Thornton. He was wearing a miniature suit tailored and fitted the kind of outfit you'd see in a fashion magazine. But that wasn't what made Rosetta's heart stop. It was the way he was sitting. His small body tilted sharply to one side, his spine curved in a way that wasn't natural. When he tried to shift position, his face crumpled with pain. And his expression, God, his expression. No 2-year-old should ever look like that. Defeated, hopeless, like he had learned that crying didn't help, that no one was coming, that he was alone in his suffering and always would be. The nanny sat in a chair nearby, scrolling through her phone earbuds, completely oblivious. Mason looked toward the door. For one moment, his eyes met Rosetta's. And in those eyes, she saw everything. The pain, the loneliness, the desperate, wordless plea for someone to help him. Rosetta forced herself to look away, to step back, to remember her place. She was just the cleaning woman. What could she possibly do? She went back downstairs, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. But something had changed. She had seen him, really seen him, and she couldn't pretend she hadn't. At 6 o'clock, Rosetta gathered her things to leave. The penthouse had grown quiet. Victoria was locked in her office. Harrison hadn't come home. The nanny was somewhere with Mason, probably ignoring him as usual. Rosetta pressed the elevator button and waited. Then she heard it. A small voice, weak and tired. "Mama." She turned. At the top of the stairs, Mason stood in the doorway of the nursery. He was holding on to the frame with one small hand, his body twisted at that awful angle, his eyes searching the empty hallway. "Mama," he called again. No one answered. No one came. The child stood there for a long moment, waiting for a mother who never showed up. Then slowly, painfully, he turned and went back inside. Rosetta pressed her hand to her mouth. The elevator doors opened behind her. She stepped inside and let them close. That night, Rosetta sat at her kitchen table in her small Bronx apartment, staring at a cup of tea that had gone cold. The television played in the other room where Grandma Ella was watching her evening programs, but Rosetta couldn't hear anything except Mason's voice in her head. "Mama, Mama." Her phone buzzed. A text from Destiny. "Hey, Mama, how was the new job? Is it as fancy as you thought?" Rosetta stared at the message for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "It's fine, baby. Just fine. How's studying?" "Exhausting, but worth it. 3 more months until graduation. I still can't believe I'm actually going to be a nurse. None of this would be possible without you, Mama. I hope you know that." Rosetta felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I know, baby. I'm so proud of you." "Love you, Mama. Don't work too hard." "Love you too. Destiny. Get some rest." She put down her phone and buried her face in her hands. Her daughter, her pride, the reason she woke up every morning, the reason she kept going when everything felt impossible. Destiny was 3 months away from a career that would change their family's future forever, and that future depended on Rosetta keeping this job. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mason's face, that curved spine, those hopeless eyes. Around midnight, Grandma Ella shuffled into the kitchen in her housecoat. She was moving slower these days, her heart condition making every step an effort, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "You still up, baby?" "Just thinking, Mama." Grandma Ella lowered herself into the chair across from Rosetta with a soft grunt. "That's a heavy-thinking face you got on. Want to tell me about it?" Rosetta hesitated. Then slowly she told her everything. The penthouse, Victoria Thornton, the crying child, the curved spine, the nanny who didn't care, the parents who were too busy with their empire to notice their son was suffering. Grandma Ella listened without interrupting. When Rosetta finished, the old woman was quiet for a long moment. "You know what you have to do," she finally said. "Mama, I can't. This job pays better than anything I've had in years. Destiny's tuition, your medication, the rent. We'll work out one way or another. The Lord provides." Grandma Ella reached across the table and took Rosetta's hand. Her grip was weak but warm. "I raised you to know right from wrong, Rosetta. I raised you to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. But if I say something, they'll fire me. They'll blacklist me. I'll never work in Manhattan again." "Maybe." Grandma Ella's eyes were steady. "But you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror. You'll be able to sleep at night. That child needs someone to fight for him, baby. And right now, you're the only one who sees him." Rosetta felt a tear slip down her cheek. "I'm scared, Mama." "Of course you are. Doing the right thing is always scary. That's how you know it matters." Grandma Ella squeezed her hand. "The measure of a person isn't in their job title, Rosetta. It's in their character. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you." She stood slowly and shuffled back toward her bedroom. Rosetta sat alone in the dark kitchen, her mother's words echoing in her head. The measure of a person isn't in their job title. It's in their character. She pulled out her phone and started searching. Child advocacy groups, legal aid organizations, child protective services procedures. She read article after article until her eyes burned. She found a free legal clinic that specialized in child welfare cases. She composed an email not using any names, just describing what she had observed and asking for advice. Then she stared at the send button for a long time, her finger pressed down. The email disappeared into the void. Whatever happened next, there was no going back now. The next morning, Rosetta arrived at the penthouse 30 minutes early. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were red and her body was exhausted, but her mind was sharp with purpose. Today, she would talk to Victoria Thornton, woman to woman, mother to mother. She would explain what she had observed, express her concerns, offer to help. Maybe Victoria didn't know what was happening. Maybe she would be grateful for another perspective. Maybe everything would be fine. The penthouse was quiet when Rosetta stepped off the elevator. She went through her morning routine, mechanically gathering supplies, checking her assignment list. Then she heard it. Crying, louder than yesterday, more desperate. Rosetta's heart clenched. She couldn't wait. She couldn't pretend anymore. That child was suffering, and every minute that passed was another minute of pain. She climbed the stairs, her pulse pounding in her ears. The nursery door was closed. She could hear Mason's sobs clearly through the wood. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, louder. The door swung open. Megan stood there, face twisted with annoyance. "What?" "I heard the child crying. Is everything okay?" "He's fine. He's just being difficult. Mrs. Thornton says to let him cry it out." "But he sounds like he's in pain. Maybe he needs to learn that crying doesn't get him what he wants." Megan started to close the door. "Go back to cleaning. This isn't your business." Rosetta put her hand on the door, stopping it. "Can I just look at him?" "Please. I raised a daughter. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes—" "You're the cleaning lady." Megan's voice dripped with contempt. "You clean floors. You don't give parenting advice. Now move your hand before I call Mrs. Thornton." Rosetta could see past Megan into the room. Mason sat on the floor in that twisted position, his small face wet with tears, his eyes fixed on her with desperate hope. "Help me," those eyes said. "Please help me." Rosetta let go of the door. Megan slammed it in her face. For a moment, Rosetta stood in the hallway, shaking with anger and frustration. She had tried to help, and she had been shut down before she could even begin. But she wasn't done. Not yet. She went back downstairs and waited. Around 10 o'clock, Victoria emerged from her home office phone, pressed to her ear, barking orders about fabric samples and shipping deadlines. Rosetta intercepted her in the hallway. "Mrs. Thornton, may I have a moment?" Victoria stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "What is it? I'm extremely busy." "It's about your son, ma'am." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. The irritation disappeared, replaced by something colder, more dangerous. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone. Then she fixed Rosetta with a stare that could freeze water. "What about my son?" Rosetta chose her words carefully. "I've noticed he seems uncomfortable in his clothes, the way he holds his body, the curve of his spine. I was wondering if maybe the clothes are too tight, too restrictive. Sometimes children develop problems when they can't move freely." "You were wondering." Victoria's voice went quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. "You were wondering about my clothes, about how I dress my own child." "I'm only trying to help, ma'am. I don't mean any help." Victoria laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You, a cleaning woman who can barely afford to fix her own shoes, think you know better than me about fashion, about child development, about my own son." "Mrs. Thornton, I didn't mean to." "What exactly did you mean, Rosetta?" Victoria stepped closer. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're accusing me of hurting my child." "No, ma'am. I would never." "Then what are you saying? Speak clearly." Rosetta took a breath. She thought about Mason's face, those hopeless eyes, the curve of his spine. "I'm saying that your son cries every day, Mrs. Thornton, not because he's difficult or spoiled. He cries because he's in pain, and I think the clothes he wears, those fitted outfits, they're too tight. They're restricting his movement. They're affecting his development." The silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria's face had gone completely still. Her eyes bored into Rosetta with an intensity that was almost physical. "Come with me," she said finally. "Now." She turned and walked toward her office without waiting to see if Rosetta followed. Rosetta's legs felt like lead, but she made herself move. The office door closed behind her with a sound like a cell door locking. Victoria sat behind her enormous desk, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. "Sit." Rosetta sat. "Let me tell you something about myself, Rosetta." Victoria's voice was calm, controlled. "I built this company from nothing. I started with a sewing machine in a studio apartment and turned it into a global empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I have dressed presidents' wives and movie stars and royalty. My designs have been featured in every major publication on Earth. I am one of the most successful women in the history of fashion." She leaned forward. "And you think I don't know how to dress my own child? Mrs. Thornton, I wasn't trying to. We have consulted 3 specialists about Mason's spine, 3 of the best pediatric orthopedists in New York. They all said the same thing. Some children develop differently. He will grow out of it." Victoria's eyes never left Rosetta's face. "Do you have a medical degree I'm not aware of?" "No, ma'am." "A background in pediatrics, child development, fashion design?" "No." "Then what exactly qualifies you to tell me anything about my son or my clothes?" Rosetta felt her throat tightening, but she forced herself to speak. "I'm a mother, Mrs. Thornton. I raised a daughter alone. I know what a suffering child looks like, and your son is suffering." "My son is fine." "With respect, ma'am, he's not. I hear him crying every day, not tantrum crying, pain crying. And when I saw him yesterday, the way his body was twisted, the way he couldn't move properly." "You saw him?" Victoria's voice sharpened. "You went into his nursery." Rosetta's stomach dropped. "The door was open. I just glanced in. After I specifically told you not to disturb him, after I made it explicitly clear that you were to stay away from my family, I was just concerned. Concerned." Victoria stood abruptly. "Let me tell you what I think, Rosetta. I think you saw an opportunity. I think you came into this penthouse and saw all this wealth, all this success, and you thought maybe you could get a piece of it. That's not true. I think you're trying to create a problem so you can be the one to solve it. Make yourself important. Make yourself indispensable." Victoria walked around the desk, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "I've dealt with people like you my entire career. Climbers, manipulators, people who see success and want to tear it down because they could never build anything themselves. Rosetta felt the blood rushing to her face. Mrs. Thornton, I am not trying to manipulate anyone. I'm trying to help your son. My son doesn't need your help. Victoria stopped directly in front of her. What my son needs is a mother who can focus on her work without being distracted by delusional cleaning women who think they know better than medical professionals. I'm not delusional. I know what I saw. And I know what you are. Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. You're a 54-year-old woman from the Bronx who cleans toilets for a living. You have no education, no credentials, no power, nothing that would make anyone listen to a single word you say. The words hit like punches. Your daughter is at Columbia, isn't she? Victoria continued. Nursing school. Very expensive. She's about to graduate. 3 more months and all your sacrifices will finally pay off. Rosetta went cold. How do you know about my daughter? I know everything about the people I let into my home. Victoria picked up a folder from her desk and opened it casually. Destiny Williams, senior year. Student loans totaling over $80,000. Outstanding balance due before graduation. She looked up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And your mother, Eleanor Williams' heart condition, diabetes medication that costs $400 a month. Living in that little apartment with you because she can't afford anywhere else. Rosetta's hands were shaking. You had me investigated. I protect my family, Rosetta, by any means necessary. Victoria closed the folder. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back downstairs. You're going to clean my floors. You're going to keep your opinions to yourself. And you're never going to mention my son again. And if I don't, Victoria tilted her head. If you don't, I'll call the agency and tell them you've been exhibiting concerning behavior around my child. I'll tell them I caught you in his nursery, touching him, undressing him. I'll file a police report. I'll make sure your name is flagged in every employment database in the city. Rosetta felt the room spinning. You would lie. You would destroy my life over a lie. I would protect my family. Victoria's expression never changed. And trust me, Rosetta, between a celebrated fashion designer and a cleaning woman from the Bronx, who do you think anyone is going to believe? The threat hung in the air like poison. Do we understand each other? Victoria asked. Rosetta's voice came out as barely a whisper. Yes. Good. Now get out of my office. And if I hear you've mentioned any of this to anyone at all, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Rosetta stood on legs that felt like water. She walked to the door. Then she stopped. I had a daughter who cried like Mason, she said quietly, not turning around. Doctors told me she was fine. They told me I was overreacting. They told me to let her cry it out. She paused. By the time they finally listened to me, she had permanent hearing loss in one ear. Silence. I didn't listen to the experts that time, Mrs. Thornton. I listened to my gut. I listened to my child. Rosetta turned slowly, and I was right. You might think I'm nobody. You might think I have no power, but I know what a suffering child looks like, and your son is suffering. She walked out before Victoria could respond. For the rest of the day, Rosetta cleaned in silence. Her hands moved automatically while her mind raced with everything that had happened. Victoria's threats echoed in her head. Her daughter's future, her mother's medication. Everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, could disappear with one phone call. But so could Mason Thornton's future. At 3 o'clock, she was cleaning the upstairs bathroom when she heard voices from the master bedroom. I don't trust her. Victoria's voice sharp and worried. Who, the cleaning woman? Harrison sounded dismissive. She asked about Mason's clothes, about his spine. She said she saw him in the nursery. A pause. Did you threaten her? I made our position clear. Victoria, she's just a cleaning lady. Nobody's going to believe her over you. I'm not taking chances, Harrison. I want you to dig deeper into her background. Find something we can use if she causes trouble. Anything. A mistake she made, a debt she owes, something we can hold over her. Rosetta backed away from the door, her heart hammering. They were building a case against her, preparing to destroy her if she tried to help Mason. She was running out of time. At 6 o'clock, as Rosetta was leaving, her phone buzzed. An email from the legal aid clinic. Ms. Williams, thank you for reaching out. Based on what you've described, this child may need intervention. However, we would need documentation, photographs, medical records, anything that establishes the pattern of harm. Without evidence, it would be your word against the parents. Evidence. Rosetta stared at the email as the elevator carried her down 47 floors. She needed to get back into that nursery. She needed to photograph Mason's body, the marks on his skin, the curve of his spine. She needed proof that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. But how Victoria was watching her every move. Megan was suspicious. Harrison was digging into her past. She was alone. Completely alone. That night, Rosetta knelt beside her bed and prayed. She prayed for guidance. She prayed for strength. She prayed for that little boy in the penthouse who had no idea that someone was fighting for him. Then she got up, dried her eyes, and started planning. The next 2 days were torture. Rosetta went to work. She cleaned. She stayed invisible. She didn't look at the nursery door, didn't react to Mason's crying, didn't give Victoria or Megan any reason to suspect she was still thinking about what she had seen. But every night she researched. Child Protective Services procedures, mandatory reporting laws, legal precedents for cases like this. She learned everything she could about how to build a case that couldn't be ignored. And she watched. She listened. On the third morning, she heard something that changed everything. Victoria was on the phone in the living room packing a designer suitcase while she talked. Yes, the car is coming at noon. Harrison and I will be at the Paris show for 36 hours. Megan has everything under control here. Rosetta's hands stilled on her cleaning cloth. Victoria and Harrison were leaving. For 36 hours. Only Megan would be here with Mason. This was it. This was her chance. She kept cleaning her face, blank, her heart pounding. At noon, Victoria and Harrison swept out in a whirlwind of designer luggage and phone calls. The moment the elevator doors closed behind them, the penthouse seemed to exhale. Megan emerged from the kitchen, phone in hand, looking relieved. Finally, she muttered. I thought they'd never leave. She noticed Rosetta and stopped. I'm going out. I have plans. You can watch the kid. Rosetta's pulse spiked. Mrs. Thornton said I shouldn't. Mrs. Thornton isn't here. Megan grabbed her purse. I've been stuck in this place for a week straight. I need a break. You're an adult. Watch the kid for a few hours. I'll be back by 3. But if you have a problem, you can explain to Mrs. Thornton why I quit. I'm sure she'll love finding a new nanny right before Fashion Week. And just like that, she was gone. Rosetta stood frozen in the empty penthouse, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. She was alone with Mason. She had maybe 3 hours before Megan came back. 3 hours to document everything. 3 hours to get the evidence she needed. She climbed the stairs slowly, her legs shaking. The nursery door was open. Mason sat on the floor wearing another fitted designer outfit, his small body twisted at that terrible angle. When he saw her, his eyes widened. He didn't cry. He didn't reach for her. He just watched as if waiting to see what she would do. Rosetta knelt down beside him. Hey, sweetheart, she whispered. Remember me? Mason nodded slowly. I'm going to help you, okay, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? For a long moment, the child just stared at her with those sad, knowing eyes. Then he reached out his small hand and placed it in hers. Rosetta felt tears burning in her eyes. Okay, baby, she said softly. Let's see what's hurting you. She began carefully removing his clothes, her hands gentle, her movements slow. The jacket came off first, then the fitted shirt, and then she saw it. Red marks, deep indentations, lines pressed into his soft skin where seams and zippers had dug in day after day after day. She photographed everything, her hands trembling. Then she removed his pants, and she froze. There on his left leg, just above the knee, was something that made her stomach drop. A mark, deep and angry and unmistakable. Not just a pressure line from tight clothing. This was something else. A clear pattern where the seam of his pants had been pressing against the same spot day after day, week after week, month after month. The skin was discolored, indented, damaged, and when she traced the line with her finger, she understood. The pants had been forcing his leg into an unnatural position, preventing him from straightening it fully. And because he couldn't straighten his leg, his hips had compensated. And because his hips had compensated, his spine had curved. Day after day, these clothes had been slowly destroying him. Rosetta photographed everything: the marks, the indentations, the curve of his spine. She took picture after picture, her tears falling freely now. Mason watched her silently. "I see you now, baby," she whispered. "I see you, and I'm going to help you. I promise." She wrapped him in a soft blanket from his crib, the first comfortable thing he had worn in God knows how long, and for the first time since she had met him, Mason Thornton smiled. It was a small smile, hesitant, like he had almost forgotten how, but it was real. And in that moment, Rosetta Williams made a decision. She didn't care about Victoria's threats. She didn't care about losing her job, her reputation, her future. She didn't care about anything except this child. She was going to save him, whatever it cost. Rosetta's phone showed 47 photographs, 47 pieces of evidence that could change everything. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she scrolled through them, each image more damning than the last. The marks on Mason's legs, the grooves pressed into his skin, the curve of his spine, the damage that had been building day after day while everyone looked the other way. She looked at the clock. 12:47 p.m. Megan had said she would be back by 3. That gave Rosetta just over 2 hours to decide what to do. Mason sat on the floor beside her, wrapped in the soft blanket, watching her with those quiet eyes. Without the restrictive clothes, his small body had already begun to relax. He wasn't crying anymore. For the first time since she had met him, he looked almost peaceful. "What do I do, baby?" Rosetta whispered. "What do I do?" Her phone buzzed. The email from the legal aid clinic was still open. Without evidence, it would be your word against the parents. She had evidence now, real evidence. But was it enough? Would anyone believe her? Would anyone care? She thought about Victoria's threats, the investigation into her background, the promise to destroy her life if she spoke up. Then she thought about Mason, about what would happen if she walked away, about the damage that would continue day after day until it was too late to fix. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. The measure of a person isn't in their job title, it's in their character. Rosetta made her decision. She pulled up the number for Mount Sinai Hospital and pressed call. "Mount Sinai emergency. How can I help you?" "I need to bring in a child, a 2-year-old boy. I believe he's been injured. His spine is curved and there are marks on his body from restrictive clothing. He needs to be examined by a doctor." "Are you the parent or guardian?" Rosetta's throat tightened. "No, I work for his family, but his parents are out of town and the nanny left me alone with him." A pause. "Ma'am, we'll need parental consent for any examination." "What if the parents are the ones causing the harm?" Another pause, longer this time. "Bring him in. We'll figure out the rest when you get here. Ask for Dr. Angela Torres in pediatrics. Tell them it's a child welfare concern." "Thank you. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Rosetta ended the call and looked at Mason. "We're going to take a little trip, sweetheart." "Okay, I'm going to take you somewhere safe." Mason nodded slowly. He reached up and touched her face with his small hand. "Nice lady," he said softly. Rosetta felt her heart crack open. "That's right, baby. I'm the nice lady, and I'm not going to let anyone hurt you anymore." She gathered the diaper bag, made sure her phone was charged, and picked Mason up carefully, supporting his small body the way she had learned to do over the past few days. Then she walked out of the penthouse with him in her arms. The elevator ride down felt like descending into the unknown. Rosetta held Mason close, her heart pounding with every floor that passed. What was she doing? She was taking a child that wasn't hers out of his home without permission. This could be considered kidnapping. She could go to prison. But she thought about those marks on his legs, that curve in his spine, the months of damage that had accumulated while everyone who should have protected him looked the other way. Some things were worth the risk. The lobby was empty when they stepped out. Rosetta walked quickly toward the street, her eyes scanning for anyone who might recognize them, anyone who might ask questions. "Excuse me." She froze. A woman stood near the entrance, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, expensive coat draped over her arm. She was staring at Mason with a curious expression. "That's the Thornton boy, isn't it, Victoria's son?" Rosetta's blood turned to ice. "I'm sorry." "Mason? I recognize him from Victoria's Instagram. I live in the building." The woman smiled. "He's even more adorable in person. Are you the new nanny?" "Yes." The lie came out before Rosetta could stop it. "Just taking him for a walk." "In this weather, it's supposed to rain later." The woman tilted her head. "Does Victoria know you're taking him out? She's usually so particular about his schedule. She's traveling. She asked me to give him some fresh air." The woman studied her for a moment. Something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion, concern. Then she shrugged. "Well, tell Victoria that Amanda says hello. I adore her new collection." She walked away toward the elevator. Rosetta didn't breathe until the doors closed behind her. Then she moved. Fast. Mount Sinai was only 8 blocks away, but it felt like 8 miles. Every face on the street seemed to be watching her. Every passing car seemed to slow down. Every second that ticked by brought Megan closer to returning to an empty penthouse. 3 p.m. Rosetta walked faster. Mason clung to her, his small arms wrapped around her neck. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. He just held on, trusting her completely. "Almost there, baby," she whispered. "Almost there." The hospital entrance appeared ahead. Rosetta felt a surge of relief so powerful it nearly knocked her down. She pushed through the doors and approached the emergency desk. "I need to see Dr. Angela Torres. It's a child welfare concern. They told me to ask for her specifically." The nurse looked up, assessed the situation in one quick glance, and picked up a phone. "Dr. Torres to emergency intake. Dr. Torres to emergency intake." Within minutes, a woman in a white coat appeared. She was in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She took one look at Rosetta and Mason and gestured for them to follow. "This way, quickly." They walked through a series of corridors until they reached a private examination room. Dr. Torres closed the door behind them. "I'm Dr. Angela Torres. Tell me everything." Rosetta set Mason down gently on the examination table and pulled out her phone. "I work as a cleaning woman for the Thornton family, Victoria and Harrison Thornton. Their son Mason is 2 years old. For the past week, I've been hearing him cry every day. Not normal crying, pain crying." She opened her photos and handed the phone to Dr. Torres. "Today, when his parents were out of town and the nanny left, I finally got a chance to examine him myself. These are the marks I found on his body." Dr. Torres scrolled through the images slowly. Her expression grew darker with each one. "How long has this been happening?" "I don't know for certain. I've only been working there a week. But from what I can tell, months at least. Maybe longer." "And the parents? What do they say?" "They've consulted doctors, 3 specialists. Everyone told them it was growing pains or developmental differences, that he'd grow out of it." Dr. Torres looked up sharply. "Did any of these doctors examine the clothes he wears?" "I don't think so. Mrs. Thornton designs them herself, custom fitted for photo shoots and social media. He wears them every day, all day." The doctor set down the phone and turned to Mason. "Hey there, little guy. Can I take a look at you? I promise I'll be gentle." Mason looked at Rosetta. She nodded. "It's okay, sweetheart. Dr. Torres is going to help you." For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Torres conducted a thorough examination. She measured the curve of his spine. She documented the marks on his legs. She tested his range of motion, noting how his joints had adapted to unnatural positions. When she finished, her face was grim. "This is postural scoliosis," she said. Abnormal curvature of the spine caused by external factors, in this case, prolonged restriction of natural movement. The marks on his legs are consistent with constant pressure from tight clothing over an extended period. Can it be fixed? With immediate intervention, physical therapy and proper care, yes. Most of the damage can be reversed. Dr. Torres paused. But if this had continued for another 6 months, a year, we'd be talking about surgery, possibly permanent disability. Rosetta felt the words hit her like a physical blow. I need to contact Child Protective Services, Dr. Torres continued. This constitutes medical neglect at minimum, possibly abuse. The parents will say they didn't know. They'll say the doctors told them he was fine. The doctors who examined him clearly didn't look closely enough. Dr. Torres picked up a phone. But that's not your problem to solve. You've done your part. You brought him here. Now let us do ours. 1:58 p.m. Rosetta sat in the waiting room while Dr. Torres made her calls. Mason was with a nurse being fitted for soft, comfortable clothes that wouldn't hurt him. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Where are you? The penthouse is empty. Where is Mason? Rosetta's heart stopped. Megan. Megan had come back early. Another text arrived. Mrs. Thornton is going to kill you. I'm calling her right now. Then another. Actually, I'm calling the police. You kidnapped her son. You're going to prison. Rosetta's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. This was it. Everything she had feared was happening. But before she could respond, Dr. Torres appeared in the doorway. Ms. Williams, CPS is on their way. They want to talk to you. The nanny found out. She's calling the police. She's calling Mrs. Thornton. Dr. Torres' expression hardened. Let her. I've already documented everything. Whatever story they try to tell, the medical evidence doesn't lie. She sat down beside Rosetta. You did the right thing. You may have saved that child's life. But what happens now to Mason, to me? CPS will investigate. They'll interview the parents, examine the home, review the medical records. Based on what I've found, they'll likely place Mason in protective custody until the investigation is complete. And the parents? That depends on what CPS finds. If this was negligence, they'll be required to take parenting classes and follow strict guidelines. If it was intentional abuse... Dr. Torres shook her head. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, the important thing is that Mason is safe. 2:34 p.m. The police arrived first. 2 officers walked into the waiting room, their expressions professional, but wary. One of them approached Rosetta. Ma'am, are you Rosetta Williams? Yes. We received a report that you removed a child from his home without parental permission. Can you explain what happened? Before Rosetta could answer, Dr. Torres stepped forward. Officers, I'm Dr. Angela Torres, pediatric specialist. Ms. Williams brought this child to our emergency room with serious concerns about his welfare. I've completed a full examination and documented evidence of medical neglect. She handed them a folder. The child has postural scoliosis caused by prolonged restriction of movement. There are pressure marks on his body consistent with wearing overly tight clothing for months at a time. I've already contacted Child Protective Services. The officers exchanged glances. Ma'am, that may be true, but she still removed the child without authorization. She removed the child to get him medical attention. That's not kidnapping, that's intervention. The parents are claiming... I don't care what the parents are claiming. Dr. Torres's voice was steel. I care about this child, and if Ms. Williams hadn't brought him here today, we might be looking at permanent disability 6 months from now. So unless you're planning to arrest someone for saving a child's life, I suggest you wait for CPS before making any decisions. The officers hesitated. We'll wait for CPS, one of them finally said. But nobody leaves until this is sorted out. 3:17 p.m. The CPS caseworker arrived. Her name was Sandra Mitchell, a black woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a thick folder of paperwork. She interviewed Rosetta for nearly an hour. Every detail, every observation, every conversation she'd had with Victoria and Megan and Harrison. Rosetta told her everything. The crying, The threats, the investigation into her background, the moment she discovered the marks on Mason's leg. When she finished, Sandra closed her notebook and looked at her for a long moment. "You know you could lose everything for this," she said quietly. "Your job, your reputation, maybe even your freedom depending on how this plays out." "I know." "Then why did you do it?" Rosetta thought about the question, about her mother's words, about Destiny's future, about everything she had risked and everything she still stood to lose. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't," she finally said. "That little boy was suffering and nobody was helping him. Somebody had to do something. If nobody else was going to step up, then it had to be me." Sandra nodded slowly. "That took courage, Miss Williams. Real courage." "It didn't feel like courage. It felt like the only choice I could make." 4:02 p.m. The waiting room doors burst open. Victoria Thornton stormed in like a hurricane, her face twisted with rage. Harrison followed close behind, looking pale and shaken. 3 men in expensive suits flanked them. Lawyers. "Where is my son?" Victoria's voice echoed through the room. "Where is he? What have you done with him?" She spotted Rosetta and stopped dead. "You." The word came out like venom. "I knew it. I knew you were trouble the moment I laid eyes on you." She advanced toward Rosetta, her designer heels clicking against the floor like hammer blows. "I warned you. I told you what would happen if you interfered with my family. And what did you do? You kidnapped my child. You stole him from his home." "Mrs. Thornton." Sandra stepped forward. "Who are you?" Victoria spun on her. "Who the hell are you? Sandra Mitchell, Child Protective Services. I need you to calm down." "Calm down. This woman took my son. I want her arrested. I want her in prison. I want—" "Mrs. Thornton. Doctor." Torres appeared from the examination room, her voice cutting through Victoria's tirade. "Your son is being treated for injuries consistent with medical neglect. I've documented everything. Unless you want to have this conversation in front of a judge, I suggest you lower your voice." Victoria went still. "Injuries." Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. "What injuries?" Dr. Torres handed him the folder she had given the police earlier. "Your son has developed postural scoliosis, abnormal curvature of the spine caused by prolonged restriction of movement. There are pressure marks on his legs from tight clothing. His joints have adapted to unnatural positions." Harrison opened the folder. His face went white as he looked at the photographs. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Oh my God, Victoria, look at this." "Let me see." Victoria snatched the folder from his hands. For a long moment, she stared at the images in silence. This can't be right. He wore those clothes every day. I designed them myself. They were perfect." "They were too tight," Dr. Torres said flatly. "They restricted his movement. They forced his body into positions it was never meant to hold. Day after day, month after month, the damage accumulated." "But the doctors said—" "The doctors you consulted didn't look closely enough. They saw a wealthy family with expensive clothes and assumed everything was fine. Nobody thought to ask if the clothes themselves might be the problem." Victoria's hands were shaking. The folder slipped from her fingers and scattered across the floor. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know. How could I know?" "You could have listened," Rosetta said quietly. Victoria's head snapped toward her. "What did you say?" "I told you something was wrong. I told you he was in pain. I told you the clothes were hurting him." Rosetta stood slowly, her voice steady, despite her pounding heart. "But you didn't want to hear it. You called me nobody. You threatened to destroy my life. You said nobody would believe me over you." "I was protecting my family." "You were protecting your image." Rosetta stepped closer. "Your son cried every single day, Mrs. Thornton, every single day. And instead of listening to him, instead of really looking at him, you put him in front of cameras. You dressed him up like a doll. You made him part of your brand." "That's not fair. I love my son." "Then why didn't you hear him?" Rosetta's voice cracked. "Why didn't anyone hear him?" The room went silent. Victoria stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly something in her face crumbled. "I heard him," she said, her voice barely audible. "I heard him crying every day, but I told myself it was normal. I told myself all children cry. I told myself—" She stopped. Her eyes filled with tears. "I told myself he was fine because I needed him to be fine, because if he wasn't fine, then I was failing. And I couldn't be failing. Not me. Not Victoria Thornton." She sank into a chair, her perfect posture collapsing. "What kind of mother does that make me?" Nobody answered. 5:15 p.m. Sandra Mitchell took Victoria and Harrison into a private room for an interview. The lawyers followed, their faces grim. Rosetta sat alone in the waiting room, exhausted beyond words. The adrenaline that had carried her through the day was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Her phone buzzed. A text from Destiny. "Mama, are you okay? I've been trying to call you for hours." Rosetta stared at the message. How could she explain what had happened? How could she tell her daughter that she might have just destroyed everything they had worked for? Before she could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. "Miss Williams, Mason is asking for you." Rosetta's heart clenched. She followed the nurse down the corridor to a small room where Mason sat on a bed wearing soft pajamas instead of designer clothes. He looked up when she entered, and his face transformed. "Nice lady." He reached for her with both arms. Rosetta crossed the room and gathered him into her embrace. He was warm and small and alive, and for the first time all day, she felt like she could breathe. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered. "How are you feeling?" "Better." His small voice was clearer than she had ever heard it. "No more ouchies." "That's right, baby. No more ouchies." She held him close, rocking gently the way she used to rock Destiny when she was small. Mason relaxed against her, his small hand gripping her shirt. "Nice lady stay?" he asked quietly. Rosetta felt tears burning in her eyes. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know what's going to happen." "Please stay." She pressed her lips to his forehead. "I'll try, baby. I promise I'll try." 6:42 p.m. Sandra Mitchell found Rosetta still in Mason's room, the child asleep in her arms. "We need to talk," Sandra said quietly. "Outside." Rosetta carefully laid Mason down on the bed, covered him with a blanket, and followed Sandra into the hallway. "What's happening?" "The parents have agreed to cooperate fully with our investigation. Mason will remain in protective custody at the hospital tonight while we assess the home environment." "And the charges against me? The kidnapping claim?" Sandra was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Thornton has withdrawn her complaint." Rosetta's knees nearly buckled. "She what?" "After seeing the medical evidence and hearing the full story, she acknowledged that you acted in Mason's best interest. She's not pursuing charges." "I don't understand. She threatened to destroy me. She said, 'People say a lot of things when they're scared, Ms. Williams, and Victoria Thornton is very, very scared right now. Not of you, of herself, of what she allowed to happen to her own child.'" Sandra looked through the window at Mason sleeping peacefully on the bed. "You saved that boy. Whatever happens next, whatever complications arise, you should know that. You saw something wrong, and instead of looking the other way, you acted. That's rare. That's brave." "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear." Sandra handed her a business card. "Get some rest tonight. We'll need you to come in tomorrow for a formal statement. But for now, go home. Hug your mother. Call your daughter. You've earned it." 8:15 p.m. Rosetta stood outside the hospital, the evening air cool against her face. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her phone buzzed. This time she answered. "Mama." Destiny's voice was tight with worry. "Where have you been? I've been calling all day." "I know, baby. I'm sorry. Something happened." "Are you okay? You sound exhausted." "I am exhausted, but I'm okay." Rosetta paused. "Destiny, I need to tell you something. The job at the penthouse, it didn't work out. I might have made things very complicated for us." "What do you mean? What happened?" Rosetta took a deep breath and told her daughter everything. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mama," Destiny finally said, her voice thick with emotion, "you did the right thing. But your tuition, the loans, if I can't work, we'll figure it out, we always do." Destiny's voice cracked. "Mama, you saved a child's life today. That little boy was suffering, and you were the only person who cared enough to do something about it. I am so proud of you." Rosetta felt the tears she had been holding back all day finally spill over. "I was so scared, baby. I'm still scared." "I know, but you did it anyway. That's what courage is." Destiny paused. "That's what you taught me, Mama. Every day of my life, that's exactly what you taught me." 9:30 p.m. Rosetta climbed the stairs to her apartment slowly, her legs heavy with exhaustion. When she opened the door, Grandma Ella was sitting at the kitchen table waiting. "I saw the news," the old woman said quietly. "Victoria Thornton's son hospitalized. Child Protective Services involved. They didn't name you, but I knew." Rosetta sank into the chair across from her mother. "I did it, Mama. I took him to the hospital. I showed them everything. And CPS is investigating. The mother withdrew her complaint. The child is safe." Rosetta's voice broke. "But I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I did enough." Grandma Ella reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. "You did everything, baby. You saw a child who needed help, and you helped him. That's all any of us can do." Her eyes were bright with tears. "I raised you right, Rosetta. I always knew I raised you right." "I was so afraid, Mama." "Fear means you understood what was at stake. Acting anyway means you have character." Grandma Ella squeezed her hands. "The measure of a person isn't in their job title, it's in their character. And yours, baby, is pure gold." That night, for the first time in a week, Rosetta slept without dreaming of crying children and cold marble floors. She had done what she could. Now she had to wait and see what the morning would bring. The phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Rosetta jerked awake, her heart already pounding before she was fully conscious. She grabbed the phone from her nightstand and saw an unfamiliar number. "Hello? Ms. Williams, this is Sandra Mitchell from CPS. I need you to come to Mount Sinai Hospital immediately." Rosetta sat up, her blood turning cold. "What happened? Is Mason okay?" "Mason is fine, but there's been a development. Victoria Thornton wants to speak with you." "With me? Why?" "I think you need to hear it from her directly." "How soon can you get here?" Rosetta was already pulling on her clothes. 20 minutes. "I'll meet you in the lobby." The line went dead. Rosetta moved through her apartment like a woman possessed. Her hands shook as she tied her shoes. Her mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, each one worse than the last. Victoria had changed her mind. She was pressing charges after all. The lawyers had found some way to turn everything around. Rosetta was going to lose everything. Grandma Ella appeared in the doorway, her housecoat wrapped tight against the morning chill. "Where are you going so early?" "The hospital. CPS called. Something's happening." "Something good or something bad?" "I don't know, Mama. I don't know anything." Grandma Ella crossed the room and took her daughter's face in her weathered hands. "Whatever happens, you hold your head high. You hear me? You did nothing wrong." "I'm scared. I know. But you go anyway. That's what courage is." Rosetta kissed her mother's cheek and ran out the door. 7:23 a.m. Sandra Mitchell was waiting in the hospital lobby, her expression unreadable. She led Rosetta through a maze of corridors without speaking, and the silence felt like a weight pressing down on Rosetta's chest. "Can you at least tell me what's happening?" Rosetta finally asked. Sandra stopped outside a closed door. "Last night after you left, Victoria Thornton had what I can only describe as a breakdown. She spent 3 hours looking through every photograph on her phone, every image she ever posted of Mason, every campaign photo, every social media update. And she saw what she had refused to see before, the way his body changed over time, the way his smile disappeared, the way he stopped looking at the camera." Sandra paused. She didn't sleep at all. She's been here since 4 in the morning, sitting by his bed, watching him breathe. Why does she want to talk to me? I think she needs to say something, and I think you need to hear it. Sandra opened the door. Take as long as you need. Rosetta stepped inside. Victoria Thornton sat in a chair beside Mason's bed, looking nothing like the woman Rosetta had met a week ago. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. Her perfect hair hung limp around her face. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked up when Rosetta entered, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Thank you for coming, Victoria finally said. Her voice was hoarse, stripped of all its previous sharpness. Rosetta didn't move from the doorway. They said you wanted to talk. I do. Victoria's gaze dropped to her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. I spent all night trying to figure out what to say, how to explain, how to apologize. She shook her head slowly. But there are no words for what I've done. What you've done. Victoria looked up. Her eyes were red raw, emptied of everything except pain. I hurt my son. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but I hurt him just the same. Day after day, I put him in clothes that were destroying his body, and I called it love. I called it building his future. I called it being a good mother. Her voice cracked. But you were right, Rosetta. I didn't see him. I saw a brand opportunity. I saw content for my Instagram. I saw the next generation of my empire. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I never saw my son. Rosetta felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserved to hear it. Because you tried to tell me the truth, and I threatened to destroy you for it. Because you saw what I couldn't see, and instead of walking away, you risked everything to save him. Victoria stood slowly, her movements hesitant, uncertain. I grew up with nothing, she said quietly. Did you know that my mother cleaned houses just like you? We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. I wore clothes from thrift stores until I was 16. Rosetta said nothing. When I started my company, I swore I would never be poor again. I would never be powerless. I would build something so big, so successful, that no one could ever look down on me again. Victoria's voice trembled. And I did. I built an empire. I became Victoria Thornton fashion icon. I had money, power, respect. She looked at Mason sleeping on the bed. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started. I forgot that success was supposed to mean freedom. Instead, I became a prisoner of my own image. And I made my son a prisoner too. 8:15 a.m. The door opened and Harrison walked in. He looked as wrecked as his wife, his expensive suit replaced by wrinkled khakis and a plain shirt. He stopped when he saw Rosetta. You came, he said. I wasn't sure you would. Your wife asked to see me. Harrison nodded slowly. He walked to Victoria's side and put his hand on her shoulder. We've been talking all night, he said, about what happened, about how we got here, about what we need to do differently. And what did you decide? Harrison looked at his wife. Something passed between them, an understanding that had clearly cost them both dearly to reach. We're going to change, Victoria said. Not just a little, everything. I'm closing the children's line permanently. No more photo shoots with Mason, no more campaigns, no more using him as a prop for my business. We're selling the penthouse, Harrison added. We're moving somewhere smaller, somewhere that feels like a home instead of a showroom. And we're going to therapy, Victoria continued. Individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy. Whatever it takes to learn how to be real parents instead of brand managers. Rosetta listened to their promises, their plans, their proclamations of change. She wanted to believe them. Part of her did believe them, but another part remembered the threats, the cold cruelty in Victoria's eyes, the casual way she had tried to destroy Rosetta's life. That all sounds good, Rosetta said carefully, but words are easy, actions are harder. Victoria flinched. I know you have no reason to trust me. After what I did, what I said to you, she took a shaky breath. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I can be better. Why does my opinion matter? I'm just the cleaning woman, remember? The words landed like a slap. Victoria closed her eyes. You're not just anything, Rosetta. You're the woman who saved my son. You're the woman who had more courage in 1 week than I've had in my entire life. She opened her eyes. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry for everything I said to you. 8:47 a.m. Mason stirred on the bed. His eyes fluttered open, and when he saw Rosetta, his face transformed. Nice lady. He reached for her with both arms. Rosetta crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, gathering him into her arms. He was warm and soft, and he smelled like hospital soap instead of designer fabric. Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling? Good. He pulled back and looked at her with those bright, clear eyes. No more ouchies. Doctor said I'm getting better. That's wonderful, baby. That's so wonderful. Mason looked at his parents, then back at Rosetta, his small brow furrowed. Mama was crying, he said quietly. Is Mama okay? Rosetta looked at Victoria, who had tears streaming down her face again. Your mama loves you very much, Rosetta said. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they realize how much they love someone. I love Mama too. Mason reached out toward Victoria. Don't cry, Mama. Mason make it better. Victoria let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She moved to the bed and gathered her son into her arms, holding him like she was afraid he might disappear. I love you, she whispered into his hair. I love you so much, Mason, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. Mason patted her back with his small hand. It's okay, Mama. Nice lady helped. She made the ouchies stop. Victoria looked at Rosetta over her son's head. Yes, she said softly. She did. 9:30 a.m. Sandra Mitchell returned with news. The investigation would continue, but based on the evidence and the parents' full cooperation, CPS was recommending that Mason remain with his family under supervised conditions. There will be mandatory parenting classes, Sandra explained, regular home visits, medical checkups for Mason every month. If there are any signs of backsliding, any indication that the environment has become harmful again, we'll intervene immediately. What about criminal charges? Harrison asked, his voice tight. Based on my assessment, this appears to be a case of negligent harm rather than intentional abuse. The district attorney will make the final decision, but I don't anticipate criminal prosecution as long as you continue to cooperate fully. Victoria let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. Thank you, she said. Thank you for giving us a chance. Don't thank me. Sandra nodded toward Rosetta. Thank her. If she hadn't brought Mason to the hospital when she did, we'd be having a very different conversation. 10:15 a.m. Rosetta was preparing to leave when Victoria stopped her. Wait, please, she turned. Yes. Victoria exchanged a look with Harrison, who nodded. We want to do something for you, Victoria said, for everything you've done. I didn't do it for a reward. I know. That's exactly why you deserve one. Victoria stepped closer. We've talked about this all night. We want to pay off your daughter's student loans, all of them, and your mother's medical expenses. Everything. Rosetta's heart stopped. What? You risked everything to save our son. Your job, your reputation, your future. The least we can do is make sure that sacrifice doesn't cost you and your family. Victoria's voice was steady, now determined. Please let us do this. That's a lot of money. Money is the one thing we have plenty of. What we didn't have was someone willing to tell us the truth. Victoria reached out and took Rosetta's hand. You gave us something money can't buy. You gave us a wake-up call. You gave us a chance to save our son before it was too late. Rosetta felt tears burning in her eyes. She thought about Destiny's loans, the weight that had pressed on her for 4 years. She thought about Grandma Ella's medication, the constant worry about whether she could afford the next refill. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Harrison said quietly. "Please, let us do this one thing." Rosetta looked at Mason, who was playing with a stuffed animal on the bed, his small body finally free to move without pain. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." 11:03 a.m. Rosetta called Destiny from the hospital lobby. "Mama, is everything okay? You've been gone for hours." "Everything is—" Rosetta paused, searching for the right word. "Everything is better than okay, baby." "What do you mean?" "I mean the family I worked for, the Thorntons, they want to help us. They're going to pay off your student loans." Silence on the other end. "Destiny, are you there?" "Mama?" Her daughter's voice was choked. "Are you serious?" "All of it, baby. Every penny. And Grandma's medical bills, too." A sound came through the phone that Rosetta recognized. Her daughter was crying. "I can't believe this. I can't. Mama, this changes everything. This changes our whole lives." "I know, baby. I know. You did this. You saved that little boy, and now—" Destiny couldn't finish the sentence. "We saved each other," Rosetta said softly. "That's how it works sometimes. You do the right thing, and even when it seems like it's going to cost you everything, somehow it works out." "I love you, Mama. I love you so much." "I love you too, Destiny. More than anything in this world." 12:30 p.m. The lawyers arrived. 3 of them, the same ones who had flanked Victoria and Harrison the day before. But their demeanor was different now. Less aggressive, more businesslike. "Ms. Williams, we'd like to discuss the terms of the financial arrangement," one of them said, "if you have a moment." Rosetta spent the next hour in a small conference room, listening to numbers that made her head spin. The total amount they were offering would wipe out Destiny's loans entirely, cover 2 years of Grandma Ella's medical expenses, and still leave a substantial sum for emergencies. "This is too much," Rosetta said. "I can't accept this much." "Mrs. Thornton was very specific," the lawyer replied. "She wants to ensure that you and your family never have to worry about money again, at least not in the immediate future." "But why? I threatened her empire. I exposed her secrets. Most people would want revenge." The lawyer hesitated, then set down his pen. "Can I speak off the record for a moment?" "Of course." "I've worked for the Thorntons for 7 years. I've seen Victoria at her best and her worst, but I've never seen her like this." He leaned forward. "Whatever you did, whatever you said to her, it changed something fundamental. She's not the same person she was a week ago." "People don't change that fast." "Maybe not, but sometimes they crack. Sometimes the facade falls away and they're forced to see themselves clearly for the first time." He picked up his pen again. "Whether the change lasts, I don't know. But right now, in this moment, she genuinely wants to make amends. I'd take her up on it while the offer stands." 1:45 p.m. Rosetta signed the papers. Her hand trembled as she wrote her name, each letter feeling like a step into a new life. When she finished, she sat back and stared at the documents. It was done. After decades of struggle, of working 3 jobs, of lying awake at night, worrying about bills, it was finally done. She thought about her mother's words. The measure of a person isn't in their job title, it's in their character. She had done the right thing because it was right, not for money, not for recognition, not for any reward at all. And somehow, impossibly, the reward had come anyway. 2:30 p.m. Victoria found her in the hallway outside Mason's room. "The papers are signed," Rosetta said. "Thank you. I don't have words for how much this means to my family." "It's the least we could do." Victoria hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That first day when you heard Mason crying, why didn't you just ignore it? You could have kept your head down, done your job, collected your paycheck. Nobody would have blamed you." Rosetta thought about the question. It was the same question she had asked herself 100 times over the past week. "When I was 26, she said slowly, my daughter got an ear infection. I took her to 2 different doctors, and they both told me she was fine. Just fussy, they said. Difficult. She'd grow out of it." Victoria listened without interrupting. "But I knew something was wrong. A mother knows," So I kept pushing. I found a third doctor who actually listened. By then the infection had spread. Destiny lost hearing in her left ear permanently. I'm sorry. The point is, I never forgave myself for not pushing harder from the beginning, for letting those first 2 doctors convince me I was wrong. Rosetta met Victoria's eyes. When I heard Mason crying, I recognized that sound, and I swore to myself I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. I wouldn't let another child suffer because the adults around them weren't paying attention. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "You're a better mother than I am," she finally said. "No, I'm just a mother who learned from her mistakes." Rosetta paused. "You can learn too. It's not too late." "How do you know?" "Because Mason still reaches for you. He still calls for you. He still loves you, Victoria. That means you haven't lost him yet." Rosetta touched her arm gently. "Don't waste this chance. Don't let him down again." Victoria nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I won't," she whispered. "I promise I won't." 3:15 p.m. Dr. Torres called Rosetta into her office for a final update. "Mason's prognosis is excellent," she said. "With proper physical therapy and age-appropriate clothing, we expect a full recovery within 6 to 12 months. The scoliosis should correct itself naturally as he grows." "Oh, that's wonderful news." "It is, and I want you to know that I've documented everything in his medical file. If there are ever any questions about what happened here, about who discovered the problem and took action, it's all on record." Rosetta nodded. "Thank you." "No, thank you." Dr. Torres stood and extended her hand. "In 20 years of pediatric medicine, I've seen a lot of children slip through the cracks. Parents who didn't notice, teachers who didn't report, neighbors who looked the other way." She shook Rosetta's hand firmly. "You didn't look away. You saw a child in pain and you acted. That makes you a hero, Ms. Williams, whether you feel like one or not." 4:00 p.m. Rosetta stood outside the hospital, the afternoon sun warm on her face. The day had been exhausting, overwhelming, transformative. She felt like a different person than the woman who had walked into the Thornton penthouse a week ago. Her phone buzzed, a text from Grandma Ella. "How did it go?" Rosetta smiled and typed back. "Better than I could have imagined, Mama. I'm coming home. I'll put the tea on." Rosetta started walking toward the subway station. Her steps felt lighter than they had in years. The weight she had carried for so long, the constant worry about money, about the future, about whether she could give her family everything they needed, had finally lifted. She thought about Mason's smile, about Destiny's tears of joy, about Victoria's broken facade and the real woman she had glimpsed underneath. She thought about courage and character and the power of doing the right thing even when it cost everything. 4:30 p.m. The subway car was crowded, but Rosetta found a seat near the door. She closed her eyes and let the rhythm of the train soothe her exhausted mind. A week ago, she had been a cleaning woman with nothing but her integrity. Today, she was still a cleaning woman. But she had proven something to herself, something she would carry for the rest of her life. She had looked at a mountain of power and wealth and intimidation, and she hadn't backed down. She had spoken truth to people who didn't want to hear it. She had fought for a child who couldn't fight for himself, and she had won, not because she was rich or powerful or connected, but because she was right, because she was brave, because she refused to be silent when silence was easier. 5:15 p.m. Grandma Ella was waiting at the kitchen table when Rosetta walked through the door. 2 cups of tea sat steaming, and the late afternoon light made the small apartment feel warm and golden. "Tell me everything," Grandma Ella said. So Rosetta told her about Victoria's breakdown, about the apologies and the promises, about the money that would change their family's future, about Dr. Torres and Sandra Mitchell, and all the people who had come together to protect one small boy. When she finished, Grandma Ella was crying silently, her weathered hands pressed to her heart. "I always knew," the old woman said. From the day you were born, I always knew you were special, Rosetta. Not because you were smart or talented or beautiful, though you are all of those things, but because you have a good heart, a brave heart. I learned from you, Mama. No, baby, I gave you the foundation, but you built the house. Grandma Ella reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. The measure of a person isn't in their job title, it's in their character. And your character, Rosetta Williams, is pure gold. They sat together as the sun set 2 generations of women who had survived on courage and faith and stubborn love. The apartment was small, the furniture was old, the neighborhood was rough. But in that moment, it felt like the richest place in the world. 6:30 p.m. Destiny called again that evening, her voice still thick with emotion. Mama, I talked to my advisor today. With the loans paid off, I can actually choose where I want to work after graduation. I don't have to take the highest paying job just to make payments. I can follow my heart. And where does your heart want to go? Pediatric nursing. Working with kids who don't have anyone advocating for them. Kids like Mason. Destiny paused. Because of you, Mama. Because of what you did. You showed me what it means to fight for someone who can't fight for themselves. Rosetta felt tears streaming down her face. That's all I ever wanted, baby. For you to have choices. For you to have a future. I have more than that now. I have an example. I have a mother who showed me that one person can make a difference. Destiny's voice broke. I'm going to spend my life trying to live up to that. You already have, Destiny. Every day, you already have. 8:00 p.m. That night, Rosetta lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind finally quiet for the first time in a week. She thought about Mason safe in the hospital, his body already beginning to heal. She thought about Victoria and Harrison broken, but determined to rebuild. She thought about the future, stretching out ahead of her family, full of possibilities that hadn't existed 7 days ago. She thought about her mother's words, the words that had guided her through the hardest week of her life. The measure of a person isn't in their job title, it's in their character. Rosetta Williams was still a cleaning woman. That hadn't changed. But she had learned something about herself that no job title could ever capture. She had learned that she was brave, that she was strong, that she was capable of standing up against impossible odds and winning. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new uncertainties. But tonight she rested in the knowledge that she had done something that mattered. She had saved a child's life. She had changed a family's future. She had proven that courage and character were worth more than all the money in the world, and nothing, no threat, no obstacle, no powerful person could ever take that away from her. 3 weeks had passed since that day at Mount Sinai Hospital. Rosetta stood at the kitchen sink washing the breakfast dishes when her phone buzzed with a text message. She dried her hands and picked it up. Can you come to the new apartment today? Mason keeps asking for the nice lady. 2 p.m. if possible. Victoria. Rosetta stared at the message for a long moment. In the week since everything had happened, Victoria had texted her several times with updates about Mason's progress, about the move, about the therapy sessions. But this was the first time she had asked Rosetta to visit. She typed back, "I'll be there." The response came immediately. "Thank you. It means more than you know." 10:30 a.m. Destiny called while Rosetta was getting dressed. "Mama, guess what? I just got my final clinical placement assignment." "Where?" "Mount Sinai Pediatrics, the same unit where you took Mason." Destiny's voice was bubbling with excitement. "Dr. Torres requested me specifically. She said she wanted someone on her team who understood what advocacy really meant." Rosetta felt her heart swell. "Baby, that's wonderful." "It's because of you, Mama. Everything good that's happening is because of you." "No, Destiny, it's because you worked hard, because you earned it." "I worked hard because you showed me how. You showed me what it looks like to never give up, even when everything is against you." Destiny paused. "I'm so proud to be your daughter." Rosetta wiped away a tear. "And I'm so proud to be your mother." 11:15 a.m. Grandma Ella was sitting in her favorite chair when Rosetta came into the living room. The old woman looked stronger these days. The new medication, the one they could finally afford without worry, was making a real difference. "You're going to see them today," Grandma Ella said. It wasn't a question. "Victoria invited me. Mason's been asking about me." "That child knows who saved him." Grandma Ella reached out and took Rosetta's hand. "How do you feel about seeing them again?" Rosetta considered the question carefully. Nervous, hopeful, scared. Scared of what? That it won't be real, that they'll have slipped back into their old ways, that everything will have been for nothing. Grandma Ella squeezed her hand. "And if it is real, if they really have changed, then I'll be grateful. But I'll also be watching. Trust has to be earned." "That's my wise girl," Grandma Ella smiled. "Go see that baby, and remember whatever you find, you did your part. The rest is up to them." 12:45 p.m. The new apartment was in Brooklyn, a far cry from the Manhattan penthouse. Rosetta took the subway, her mind churning with memories and questions. She remembered Victoria's cold eyes that first day, the threats, the cruelty, the way she had tried to destroy Rosetta's life for daring to speak the truth. But she also remembered Victoria's breakdown at the hospital, the raw honesty, the genuine grief when she finally saw what she had done to her son. People could change. Rosetta believed that. But she also knew that change was hard, and most people gave up long before it stuck. Which Victoria would she find today? The monster or the mother? 47 p.m. Rosetta stood outside the apartment building, gathering her courage. It was a modest building, nothing like the gleaming tower where she had first met the Thorntons. Regular people lived here, families, workers, real life. She pressed the buzzer. "Come up," Victoria's voice through the intercom. "Third floor, apartment 3B. The elevator was small and slow, nothing like the high-speed lift that had carried her to the penthouse. Rosetta found the contrast fitting somehow. The apartment door opened before she could knock. Victoria stood there, and for a moment, Rosetta didn't recognize her. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfect hair, the flawless makeup. Victoria wore jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired, but it was a different kind of tired than before. Not the exhaustion of maintaining an image, the tiredness of actually living. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said. "Please come in." 1:52 p.m. The apartment was small but warm, toys scattered across the floor, children's books stacked on a coffee table, drawings taped to the refrigerator. It looked like a home where a child actually lived, not a showroom designed to impress. And there, sitting on a playmat in the middle of the living room, was Mason. Rosetta's breath caught. The child looked completely different. He was wearing soft cotton clothes that allowed him to move freely. His body, which had been so twisted and contorted before now, sat straight and relaxed. And when he looked up and saw her, his face exploded into a smile. "Nice lady." He scrambled to his feet and actually ran across the room toward her. Rosetta knelt down and caught him in her arms. He threw his small arms around her neck and squeezed tight. "You came. Mama said you were coming, but I was scared you wouldn't come." "Of course I came, sweetheart." Rosetta held him close, tears streaming down her face. "I would never break a promise to you." Mason pulled back and looked at her with those bright, clear eyes. "Watch what I can do." He stepped back and demonstrated bending down to touch his toes, then stretching his arms up high above his head, movements that would have been impossible for him a month ago. "The doctor says I'm getting so strong," Mason said proudly. "And I don't have to wear the ouchy clothes anymore. Mama threw them all away." Rosetta looked at Victoria, who was watching the exchange with tears in her eyes. "All of them?" Rosetta asked. "Every single one. I burned the samples too." Victoria's voice was thick. "I couldn't stand looking at them knowing what they'd done to him." 2:15 p.m. Mason wanted to show Rosetta his room, so she let him lead her down the hallway by the hand. His room was small but cheerful, with walls painted in bright colors and shelves full of books and toys. "This is my bed," Mason announced. "And this is my bear, and this is my special picture." He pointed to a framed drawing on the wall beside his bed. Rosetta moved closer to look at it. It was a crayon drawing of a brown woman holding a small boy. Hearts floated around them. At the top, in a child's unsteady letters, it said, "Nice lady." "I made it for you," Mason said shyly. "But Mama said I should keep it in my room so I can see it every day. Is that okay?" Rosetta felt her heart crack open all over again. "That's more than okay, sweetheart. That's perfect." "I think about you every night," Mason said quietly. "When Mama puts me to bed, I tell the picture goodnight. I say goodnight, nice lady. Thank you for making the ouchies stop." Rosetta gathered him into her arms and held him tight, her tears soaking into his soft cotton shirt. "You're welcome, baby. You're so welcome." 2:35 p.m. Victoria had coffee waiting when Rosetta returned to the living room. They sat across from each other while Mason played on the floor nearby, building something elaborate with blocks. "How are the therapy sessions going?" Rosetta asked. "Hard." Victoria wrapped her hands around her mug. "Harder than anything I've ever done. The therapist makes me look at things I've spent my whole life avoiding." "Like what?" "Like why I was so obsessed with success, why I needed to control everything, why I turned my own son into a prop instead of treating him like a person." Victoria's voice trembled. "Turns out when you grew up poor and powerless, you spend your whole life trying to prove you're worth something, and you end up hurting everyone around you in the process. That sounds like a lot of self-awareness for 3 weeks. The therapist is very good at her job, and I have strong motivation." Victoria looked at Mason with an expression of naked love and regret. "Every time I want to quit, every time it gets too painful to continue, I think about those marks on his legs. I think about how he used to cry, and I didn't listen." She turned back to Rosetta. "I will never forgive myself for what I did to him. The therapist says I need to learn to live with that, to use it as motivation instead of letting it destroy me. Are you learning? Trying, every day trying. 3:00 p.m. Harrison arrived home while they were still talking. He looked different too, less polished, more present. He was carrying grocery bags. "Rosetta, glad you could make it." He set the bags on the counter and came to shake her hand. "Mason hasn't stopped talking about you all week." "Daddy." Mason abandoned his blocks and ran to his father. Harrison scooped him up with ease, holding him close. "Hey, buddy. How's my favorite guy?" "Good, nice lady came to visit. I showed her my picture." "That's great, Mason." Harrison kissed his son's forehead. "Why don't you go play while the grown-ups talk for a bit?" Mason nodded and wiggled down, running back to his blocks. But before he settled in, he turned back to look at Rosetta. "You'll stay, right? You won't leave." "I'll stay for a while, sweetheart, I promise." Satisfied, Mason returned to his building project. 3:15 p.m. Harrison sat down beside Victoria and took her hand. The gesture was simple but meaningful. Rosetta could see something different in the way they related to each other now. Less tension, more connection. "I want to thank you again," Harrison said, "for everything you did. You've already thanked me and compensated me very generously." "Money isn't thanks. Money is just money." Harrison leaned forward. "What you did took courage, real courage, the kind most people don't have. I just did what anyone would have done." "No." Victoria shook her head firmly. "That's not true. I've been thinking about this a lot, about all the people who could have noticed what was happening to Mason, the doctors, the photographers, the nannies we had before Megan, our friends, our families." She paused. "Do you know how many people saw Mason in those clothes over the past year? Hundreds? Maybe thousands if you count the photos on social media. And not one of them said anything. Not one of them looked closely enough to see that something was wrong. Maybe they didn't know what to look for." "Maybe, but I think it's more than that." Victoria's voice hardened with self-recrimination. "I think people saw what they wanted to see. They saw wealth and success and a perfect family. They saw the image I had so carefully constructed. And they didn't look underneath because they didn't want to, because looking underneath might have made them uncomfortable." Harrison nodded. "But you looked, Rosetta. You were in our home for less than a week, and you saw what everyone else missed, what we missed." "I'm a mother. Mothers notice things. So am I, Victoria said quietly. I'm his mother, and I didn't notice. Or I didn't want to notice. Which is worse. 3:45 p.m. Rosetta's phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Ella. Everything okay? She typed back quickly. Better than okay. They're different, really different. I told you, people can change when they really want to. I'm starting to believe that, Mama. 4:00 p.m. Mason was getting tired. His energy, so bright and vibrant for the past 2 hours, was beginning to fade. Victoria noticed and stood up. Nap time, buddy. Come on. But nice lady is here, Mason protested. I don't want her to leave. She won't leave without saying goodbye, I promise. Victoria held out her hand. Come on, you need your rest. The physical therapist is coming tomorrow, remember? Mason sighed dramatically the way only a 2-year-old can sigh. But he stood up and took his mother's hand. Then he turned back to Rosetta. Will you come back? Will you visit me again? Rosetta looked at Victoria, who nodded slightly. Yes, sweetheart. I'll come back whenever you want me to. Mason's face lit up. He ran to Rosetta and hugged her one more time, quick and fierce. I love you, nice lady. The words hit Rosetta like a wave. She hugged him back, her voice thick with emotion. I love you too, Mason, so much. Victoria led him down the hallway toward his room. Rosetta watched them go, her heart full to bursting. 4:15 p.m. Harrison remained in the living room with Rosetta. He was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands. Can I tell you something? He finally asked. Of course. The night after you took Mason to the hospital, Victoria and I had the worst fight of our marriage. Screaming, crying, throwing things. All the ugliness we'd been hiding from each other for years came pouring out. Rosetta waited. I blamed her for what happened to Mason. She blamed me for being absent. We both blamed each other for becoming the kind of people who could let our child suffer without noticing. His voice cracked. At one point, I was ready to walk out. Pack a bag, leave, never look back. The marriage felt broken beyond repair. What changed? Harrison looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. We went to see Mason together the next morning. He was sleeping when we arrived, and we just stood there watching him breathe, watching his small chest rise and fall. He paused. Victoria reached for my hand, and she said, I don't know how to fix us, but I know I want to fix him. Can we start there? That's beautiful. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. No posturing, no image management, just raw truth. Harrison exhaled shakily. We started there, with Mason, with the commitment to be better for him, and somehow working on that together, we started to find each other again. How is it going, the marriage, I mean? Hard. Really hard. Some days we take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Some days we can barely look at each other without feeling shame about what we let happen. He paused. But we're still trying. That's more than I could have said a month ago. 4:30 p.m. Victoria returned from putting Mason down. Her eyes were wet. He fell asleep holding the picture he drew of you, she said to Rosetta. He really does love you. I love him too. It's hard not to. Victoria sat down heavily, exhaustion written across her face. There's something I need to tell you, something I've been wanting to say for weeks. Rosetta felt her stomach tighten. What is it? I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I said to you that day in my office, the threats I made, the things I called you. Victoria's voice was steady but pained. I told you that you were nobody, that no one would believe you over me, that I would destroy your life if you spoke up. I remember. Those words have haunted me every day since. Victoria met Rosetta's eyes directly. I need you to know that I didn't really believe them. Even when I was saying them, I knew they were wrong. I knew you were right about Mason. I knew something was wrong with him. Then why did you threaten me? Because I was terrified. Victoria's composure cracked. Not of you, of myself, of what it would mean if you were right. If I had really been hurting my own son without knowing it, without seeing it, then everything I believed about myself was a lie. She pressed her hand to her chest. I built my entire identity on being successful, on being perfect, on being the woman who had it all figured out. And you, this cleaning woman from the Bronx, you saw through all of it. You saw what I couldn't see, and that terrified me more than anything. 5:00 p.m. The confession hung in the air between them. Rosetta let it settle before responding. I understand fear, she said slowly. I've been afraid my whole life, afraid of not having enough money, afraid of not being able to provide for my family, afraid of losing everything. Then how did you find the courage to stand up to me? Rosetta thought about the question, about her mother's words, about Destiny's face, about Mason's desperate eyes. I found something that scared me more than my fear. What? Living with myself if I didn't try, looking in the mirror every day, knowing I had seen a child suffering and done nothing. Rosetta's voice hardened with conviction. I could lose my job, I could lose my reputation, I could lose everything, but I couldn't lose myself. My mother taught me that. The measure of a person isn't in their job title, it's in their character. Victoria nodded slowly. I wish my mother had taught me that, she said quietly. Maybe things would have been different. It's not too late to learn. No, I suppose it isn't. 5:15 p.m. Rosetta stood to leave. She had been there for over 3 hours, and the emotional intensity of the visit was catching up to her. Thank you for coming, Victoria said, walking her to the door. Thank you for giving us a chance to show you that we're trying. Thank you for trying. Victoria hesitated, then reached out and took Rosetta's hand. I know I have no right to ask this. After everything I did, everything I said, but... She took a shaky breath. Would you be willing to stay in Mason's life, not as an obligation, not because we're paying you, but because he needs you? He's bonded with you in a way he hasn't bonded with anyone else. Rosetta felt her heart squeeze. You want me to be part of his life. I want him to have people who love him, people he can trust, people who will tell him the truth, even when it's hard to hear. Victoria's eyes glistened. You're one of those people, Rosetta. Maybe the only one outside our family who truly sees him. Rosetta looked back toward the hallway where Mason was sleeping, where the picture he'd drawn hung beside his bed, where he whispered goodnight to her image every night. Yes, she said softly. I'll be part of his life, for as long as he wants me. 5:30 p.m. The subway ride home felt different than the ride there. Rosetta sat by the window watching the city blur past her mind, processing everything she had seen and heard. The Thorntons were changing. Really changing. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. She could see it in their exhausted faces, in their honest words, in the way they held their son like he was precious instead of a commodity. 3 weeks ago, she would never have believed it possible. But here she was, watching the impossible become real. 6:15 p.m. Grandma Ella was waiting at the kitchen table when Rosetta walked through the door. Tell me, the old woman said simply. So Rosetta told her about the apartment, about Mason's recovery, about Victoria's confession, about Harrison's honesty, about the invitation to stay in Mason's life. When she finished, Grandma Ella was smiling. See, I told you people can change. I still have doubts, Mama. 3 weeks isn't very long. They could slip back. They could, but they might not. And isn't that what hope is, believing in possibilities even when you can't see them clearly? Rosetta considered her mother's words. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't listen. Grandma Ella winked. Now come sit down. Dinner's almost ready and you need to eat. You've had a big day. 7:30 p.m. Destiny called while Rosetta was finishing dinner. Mama, I have news. More news. What is it? Dr. Torres wants me to be part of a new initiative she's starting, a training program for healthcare workers on recognizing signs of child neglect and abuse. Destiny's voice was trembling with excitement. She said the program was inspired by Mason's case, by what you did. Rosetta felt tears pricking her eyes again. It seemed like all she did lately was cry. That's wonderful, baby. She wants to interview you for the curriculum materials. She wants other healthcare workers to hear your story, to understand what it looks like when someone speaks up for a child who can't speak for themselves. She wants to interview me. Yes, she said your perspective is invaluable. You saw things that trained professionals missed. You had the courage to act when everyone else looked away. Destiny paused. Will you do it, Mama? Will you share your story? Rosetta thought about Victoria's threats, about the fear she had felt, about how close she had come to walking away. Yes, she said finally. I'll do it. If my story can help even one other child, it's worth telling. I'm so proud of you, Mama. I tell everyone about what you did. My classmates, my professors, everyone. They all think you're a hero. I'm not a hero, Destiny. I'm just a mother who remembered what it felt like to have someone not listen when my child was hurting. That's exactly what makes you a hero, Mama. You remembered, and you acted. 8:45 p.m. That night, Rosetta sat on the edge of her bed looking at a photograph on her nightstand. It was Destiny at 5 years old, the year after the ear infection that had caused her permanent hearing loss. In the picture, Destiny was smiling, but Rosetta could see the sadness in her eyes, the confusion of a child who couldn't understand why the world sounded different than it used to. For years, that photograph had been a reminder of Rosetta's failure, her guilt, the voice in her head that whispered, "You should have fought harder." But tonight, looking at it, something shifted. That little girl had grown up to be an extraordinary woman, a nurse who would spend her life helping children, a daughter who made her mother proud every single day. Maybe the failure hadn't been a failure at all. Maybe it had been a lesson, a painful, terrible lesson that had prepared Rosetta for the moment when another child needed her. Maybe that was how it worked sometimes, the worst moments of our lives becoming the seeds of our greatest strengths. 9:15 p.m. Rosetta's phone buzzed one last time before she went to sleep. A photo from Victoria. Mason in his bed asleep, clutching the drawing of Rosetta to his chest, his face peaceful, his body relaxed. No pain, no ouchies. The caption read, "Thank you for giving us our son back." Rosetta stared at the image for a long time. Then she typed back, "Thank you for becoming the parents he deserves." She set down her phone and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the interview with Dr. Torres, more visits with Mason, the ongoing work of rebuilding trust with the Thorntons. But tonight she rested, because she had done something that mattered, because one small boy was sleeping peacefully, his body finally free from pain, because sometimes courage didn't look like grand gestures or heroic acts. Sometimes it looked like an ordinary woman refusing to be silent, and sometimes that was enough to change the world. 10:00 p.m. Just before sleep took her, Rosetta whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Mama. Thank you for teaching me what matters." In the next room, Grandma Ella smiled in her sleep, as if somehow across the thin walls of their small apartment she had heard. 3 months later, the call came. Rosetta was folding laundry in her apartment when her phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "Hello, Rosetta, I need you to come to the hospital right now." Her heart stopped. "What happened? Is Mason okay?" "Mason is fine, better than fine." Victoria's voice was strange, thick with emotion. "Dr. Torres has the results of his latest evaluation. She wants us all there when she shares them. Can you come?" Rosetta was already reaching for her coat. "I'm on my way." 9:45 a.m. The subway felt slower than usual. Rosetta gripped the handrail and watched the stations pass her mind, racing through possibilities. 3 months of physical therapy, 3 months of soft clothes and freedom to move, 3 months of watching Mason transform from a suffering, defeated child into a bright, energetic little boy. But the doctors had warned them, some damage might be permanent, some effects of the prolonged restriction might never fully heal. They wouldn't know for certain until the final evaluation. "Please," Rosetta prayed silently, "please let him be okay." 10:30 a.m. Dr. Torres was waiting in her office when Rosetta arrived. Victoria and Harrison were already there, sitting close together, holding hands. Mason sat on his father's lap, playing with a toy car, oblivious to the tension in the room. "Nice lady." He scrambled down and ran to Rosetta, throwing his arms around her legs. She lifted him up and held him close. "Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling?" "Good. The doctor took lots of pictures of my back today. She said I was very brave." "You are brave, baby. The bravest boy I know." Dr. Torres smiled and gestured for Rosetta to sit. "Now that we're all here, I can share the results." She opened a folder and spread several images across her desk. "These are Mason's spine scans from 3 months ago when he was first admitted." She pointed to the first image. "You can see the pronounced lateral curvature here, approximately 22 degrees, significant for a child his age." Rosetta felt Victoria's hand reach for hers. She took it and squeezed. "And these?" Dr. Torres continued, moving to the second set of images, "are from this morning." Rosetta stared at the scans. Even to her untrained eye, the difference was obvious. The curve that had twisted Mason's small body was almost invisible now. "The curvature has reduced to 4 degrees, Dr. Torres said. "Well within normal range. His range of motion has improved by 87%. His muscle development is now consistent with typical children his age." Victoria made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "What does that mean? In plain English?" Dr. Torres smiled. "It means Mason has made a complete recovery. No surgery needed, no permanent damage. He's going to be absolutely fine." The room exploded with emotion. Victoria burst into tears, burying her face in Harrison's shoulder. Harrison's own eyes were streaming as he held his wife. Mason looked around, confused by all the crying. "Why is everyone sad?" he asked Rosetta. "They're not sad, sweetheart." Rosetta's voice was barely a whisper. "They're happy. So happy. Because of my back pictures. Because you're going to be okay, baby. Your back is all better." Mason grinned. I told Mama the ouchies were gone." 11:15 a.m. After the medical discussion, Dr. Torres asked to speak with Rosetta privately. They stepped into the hallway while Victoria and Harrison celebrated with Mason in the office. "I wanted to thank you personally," Dr. Torres said. "In my entire career, I've rarely seen a case with such a positive outcome, and it's entirely because of you. The physical therapists did all the hard work. The physical therapists couldn't have done anything if you hadn't brought him in when you did, Doctor." Torres's expression was serious. "Another 6 months in those clothes and we'd be looking at permanent skeletal deformation, possible nerve damage, a lifetime of chronic pain and mobility issues." Rosetta felt her knees weaken. "I didn't know it was that close." "Most people never do. That's why early intervention is so critical." Dr. Torres paused. "Which brings me to my other reason for wanting to speak with you." "Yes, the training program I mentioned to your daughter, the one about recognizing signs of child neglect. I've been developing the curriculum with input from social workers, pediatricians, and child psychologists. Destiny told me about it. She's very excited to be involved. What I haven't told anyone yet is that I'd like to name the program." Dr. Torres met Rosetta's eyes directly. "I want to call it the Williams Initiative, after you." Rosetta felt the breath leave her body. "What? You represent everything this program is meant to teach: observation, courage, action, the willingness to speak up when everyone else stays silent." Dr. Torres smiled. "Your story is the heart of what we're trying to accomplish. I'd be honored if you'd allow us to use your name." Rosetta couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to process what she was hearing. "I'm just a cleaning woman," she finally managed. "No." Dr. Torres shook her head firmly. "You're a hero, and it's time the world knew your name." 12:30 p.m. The celebration continued at a nearby restaurant. Victoria had insisted on treating everyone to lunch, and for once Rosetta hadn't argued. Mason sat between his parents, chattering happily about his toy car and his brave back pictures and how the nice lady was his best friend. His joy was infectious, spreading around the table like sunlight. "I have something to say," Victoria announced, standing up with her glass raised. "Something I've been wanting to say for a long time." The table fell quiet. 3 months ago, I was a different person. I was so focused on success, on image, on building my empire, that I nearly destroyed the most important thing in my life. She looked at Mason with eyes full of love and regret. "My son." Harrison reached up and took her free hand, but I was given a second chance. Because of one extraordinary woman who had the courage to see what I couldn't see, who had the strength to stand up to me when I was at my worst, who refused to let power and threats silence her. Victoria turned to Rosetta. To Rosetta Williams, the woman who saved my son, the woman who saved my family, the woman who saved me from myself. Everyone raised their glasses. Rosetta felt her face flush with embarrassment and pride. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything," Victoria replied. "You've already said everything that matters. You said it with your actions." 1:45 p.m. After lunch, Rosetta and Victoria walked together while Harrison took Mason to look at pigeons in a nearby square. "There's something else I need to tell you," Victoria said quietly. "What is it?" "I'm starting a foundation. A real one, not just a tax write-off, focused on child welfare and early intervention for developmental issues." Victoria paused. "I want you to be on the board." Rosetta stopped walking. "Me on a board?" "You understand this issue in a way that no one else does. You've lived it. You've fought for it. Your perspective is invaluable." "Victoria, I don't know the first thing about running a foundation. Neither did I when I started my company. I learned." Victoria took her hand. "We'll learn together, and along the way we'll help children like Mason, children who need someone to see them, someone to fight for them." Rosetta thought about all the children out there who were suffering in silence, all the parents who didn't know what to look for, all the voices that went unheard because no one was listening. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll do it." Victoria's face broke into a genuine smile, the kind Rosetta had never seen from her before. "Thank you, Rosetta. Thank you for everything." 3:00 p.m. That evening, Rosetta had dinner with Grandma Ella and Destiny. She told them everything about Mason's recovery, about the Williams Initiative, about Victoria's foundation, about all the ways her life had changed in the past 3 months. When she finished, Grandma Ella was crying quietly. "Mama, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, baby. Everything's right." The old woman wiped her eyes. "I've been praying for this my whole life, praying that my daughter would be recognized for who she really is. Not for what she does, but for who she is." "I'm still just a cleaning woman, Mama." "No." Grandma Ella's voice was fierce. "You're a cleaning woman who saved a child's life. You're a cleaning woman who stood up to power and won. You're a cleaning woman whose name will be on a program that helps children all over this country." She reached across the table and gripped Rosetta's hand. "You're my daughter, and I couldn't be prouder if you were the President of the United States." Destiny was crying too. "Mama, do you realize what this means? Your story is going to inspire so many people. Healthcare workers, teachers, neighbors, anyone who might be in a position to notice when a child needs help." "I'm just telling the truth. That's all I've ever done." "That's exactly the point." Destiny squeezed her mother's arm. "The truth is powerful, and you had the courage to tell it when no one else would." 6:30 p.m. 3 weeks after that dinner, Rosetta stood backstage at Columbia University's graduation ceremony. Destiny was about to walk across the stage and receive her nursing degree. After 4 years of hard work, sacrifice, and determination, her daughter was finally achieving her dream. Rosetta's hands trembled as she waited. Grandma Ella sat in the audience dressed in her finest church clothes, her face glowing with pride. Destiny Grace Williams. The name rang out through the auditorium. Rosetta watched as her daughter walked across the stage, head held high, smile radiant. When Destiny received her diploma, she looked directly at the spot where she knew her mother was watching. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Rosetta pressed her hand to her heart and mouthed back, I love you. 7:15 p.m. After the ceremony, the 3 generations of Williams women gathered for photographs. Destiny in her cap and gown, Grandma Ella in her church hat, Rosetta in a new dress that Victoria had insisted on buying for her. 3 generations of strong women, the photographer said. Say cheese? But Rosetta didn't smile on command. She smiled because she couldn't help it, because she was surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, because her daughter had just achieved something that had seemed impossible a year ago, because life, despite all its hardships, was good. 8:00 p.m. Victoria and Harrison arrived at the graduation party which Destiny had insisted on holding at a community center in the Bronx. Mason ran through the crowd now, 3 years old, completely healthy, completely happy. Nice lady. He found Rosetta and threw himself into her arms. Hey, sweetheart, look at you getting so big. I'm 3 now. I'm practically a grown-up. Rosetta laughed. You sure are, baby. Victoria approached with a wrapped gift. For Destiny, she said. A graduation present. Destiny opened it carefully. Inside was a first edition of a classic nursing textbook with a handwritten note from Dr. Torres. To Destiny Williams, whose mother taught us all what it means to truly care for children. Welcome to the profession. We're lucky to have you. Destiny's eyes filled with tears. This is too much. It's not nearly enough, Victoria replied. Your mother changed our lives. The least we can do is celebrate her daughter's success. 9:30 p.m. Later that evening, Rosetta found herself standing alone on the community center's small balcony. The party continued inside, filled with music and laughter and joy. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The penthouse, the threats, the fear, the courage she had found when she thought she had none. She thought about Mason now running around inside, playing with other children, his body strong and free. She thought about Victoria and Harrison, still learning to be better but trying every day. She thought about the Williams Initiative launching next month, ready to help families across the country. She thought about her mother's words, the words that had guided her through the hardest moments of her life. The measure of a person isn't in their job title, it's in their character. Mama, Rosetta turned. Destiny stood in the doorway, still in her cap and gown. What are you doing out here alone? Just thinking, baby, just grateful. Destiny walked over and stood beside her mother. They looked out at the Bronx skyline together, at the neighborhood where they had struggled and survived and grown. Do you remember what you told me when I was 8? Destiny asked quietly. After the ear infection, when I was crying because the kids at school made fun of my hearing aid, what did I say? You said that what makes us different is what makes us strong, that the things we overcome become the things that give us power. Destiny turned to face her mother. You overcame so much, Mama, and now you're using it to help others. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Rosetta pulled her daughter into her arms and held her tight. I'm so proud of you, Destiny. I'm proud of you too, Mama. I've always been proud of you, even before all this happened. Even when you were just cleaning floors and working 3 jobs, you were always my hero. 10:45 p.m. The party wound down. Guests departed with hugs and well wishes. Victoria and Harrison left with a sleepy Mason, promising to see Rosetta at the Foundation's first board meeting next week. Finally, only the Williams women remained. Grandma Ella sat in a chair, exhausted but happy. Destiny was helping clean up. Rosetta stood in the middle of the empty room, looking around at the remnants of celebration. Time to go home, Mama, Destiny said gently. In a minute, baby. I just want to remember this. Remember what? This moment. This feeling. Rosetta smiled. For so long, I felt like I was just surviving, working to pay bills, fighting to keep our heads above water, never stopping to appreciate what I had. She turned to face her daughter and her mother. But tonight I feel like I'm living, really living, not just surviving but thriving. And I want to remember what that feels like. Grandma Ella stood slowly and walked to her daughter's side. This is just the beginning, baby. The best is still ahead. How do you know, Mama? Because I know you. Grandma Ella took Rosetta's face in her weathered hands. You've never been someone who stops halfway. Whatever you start, you finish. Whatever you commit to, you see through. She kissed her daughter's forehead. The world is finally seeing what I've always seen. A woman of courage, a woman of character, a woman who makes the impossible possible just by refusing to give up. 11:30 p.m. That night, Rosetta lay in bed too full of emotion to sleep. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for letting us be part of tonight. Mason fell asleep saying the nice lady's name. You've given us more than we could ever repay. Rosetta typed back. You've given me more than you know. Thank you for becoming the family Mason deserves. Another message arrived. We couldn't have done it without you. See you at the board meeting. Sweet dreams, Rosetta. She set down her phone and closed her eyes. 1 year ago, she had been a cleaning woman struggling to make ends meet. Invisible. Powerless. Just another person fighting to survive in a world that didn't notice her. Now her name would be on a national initiative. She sat on the board of a foundation dedicated to child welfare. Her daughter was a nurse. Her mother was healthy. Her family was secure. And somewhere in Brooklyn, a 3-year-old boy was sleeping peacefully, his spine straight, his body free, his heart full of love for the nice lady who had saved his life. 6 months later, the Williams Initiative officially launched. Rosetta stood at a podium in a packed auditorium, looking out at hundreds of healthcare workers, social workers, teachers, and child advocates who had gathered to learn about recognizing signs of child neglect. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. Public speaking had never been her strength, but then she saw Destiny in the front row giving her a thumbs up. She saw Grandma Ella beside her beaming with pride. She saw Victoria and Harrison in the second row, Mason on his father's lap waving excitedly. She took a deep breath and began to speak. My name is Rosetta Williams. I'm a cleaning woman from the Bronx, and I'm here to tell you that you don't need a medical degree or a social work license to save a child's life. You just need to pay attention. You just need to listen. You just need to have the courage to speak up when something feels wrong. She told them everything, about Mason's crying, about Victoria's threats, about the fear that had almost paralyzed her, about the decision to act anyway. When she finished, the room was silent. Then slowly someone began to clap, then another, then another. The applause built until it was deafening, a thunderous wall of sound that made Rosetta's ears ring and her eyes overflow with tears. Destiny rushed the stage and threw her arms around her mother. You did it, Mama, you did it. We did it, baby. All of us together. Grandma Ella made her way to the stage more slowly, her heart condition limiting her movement, but not her joy. My baby girl, she said, tears streaming down her face, speaking to all these people, changing the world. I learned from the best, Mama. The 3 women stood together on that stage, holding each other while the applause continued. 3 generations. 3 survivors, 3 women who had proven that strength didn't come from money or power or status. It came from character. 1 year later, the Williams Initiative had trained over 50,000 healthcare workers across the country. Reports of early intervention for child developmental issues had increased by 34%. Countless children had been helped because someone had paid attention, had listened, had spoken up. Mason Thornton, now 4 years old, stood in the front yard of the Thornton family's new home in Connecticut, running and jumping and playing like any healthy child. His spine was perfect. His smile was constant. His life stretched ahead of him, full of possibility. Victoria had become an advocate for child welfare, speaking at conferences, writing articles, using her platform to raise awareness. Her fashion company still existed, but she had stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on what really mattered. Harrison had left Wall Street to work for a nonprofit supporting families in crisis. He said he finally understood what success really looked like. Destiny Williams was 2 years into her career as a pediatric nurse at Mount Sinai, working alongside Dr. Torres, helping children every day. Grandma Ella, despite her health challenges, was still going strong. She said she had too much to live for to give up now, And Rosetta Williams, the cleaning woman from the Bronx who had once been invisible, was now a nationally recognized advocate for children. She traveled the country, telling her story, inspiring others to find their own courage. But she never forgot where she came from. She still lived in the same small apartment in the Bronx. She still had dinner with her mother every Sunday. She still called Destiny every night before bed, and every few weeks she visited Mason. "Nice lady." He would run to her the moment she arrived, his legs strong and sure, his body free. She would scoop him up and hold him close, marveling at how big he was getting, how healthy, how happy. "I love you, nice lady," he would say. "I love you too, sweetheart," she would reply. Always and forever. The last time she visited Mason had something important to show her. "Look," he held up a drawing more detailed now than the crayon pictures of before. "I made this in school. It's for you." Rosetta took the paper and looked at it. It showed a brown woman with curly hair surrounded by children of all colors. Above the woman's head, in Mason's careful handwriting, were 2 words: "My hero." Rosetta felt tears streaming down her face. "Do you like it?" Mason asked anxiously. "I love it, baby. I love it so much." "Teacher asked us to draw our heroes. Some kids drew firefighters. Some drew doctors. I drew you." He looked up at her with those bright, clear eyes. "Because you saved me. And now you save other kids too." Rosetta knelt down and gathered him into her arms. "You saved me too, Mason. You gave me a reason to be brave." "We saved each other," Mason said simply. And in that moment, Rosetta understood something she had been trying to articulate for 2 years. Courage wasn't a destination. It was a choice. A daily decision to see the world clearly, to speak the truth, to stand up for those who couldn't stand for themselves. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor, powerful or invisible. What mattered was character. What mattered was heart. What mattered was the willingness to act when action was hard. She thought about her mother's words, the words that had guided her through everything. The measure of a person isn't in their job title, it's in their character. Rosetta Williams was still a cleaning woman. She still had rough hands and worn shoes and a body tired from decades of hard work. But she was also a mother, a daughter, a grandmother, a hero. She was a woman who had looked at injustice and refused to look away. She was a woman who had faced down power and refused to be silent. She was a woman who had changed the world, one act of courage at a time. And standing there in that Connecticut yard, holding the child she had saved, surrounded by the family she had helped heal, Rosetta Williams finally understood the truth that had been waiting for her all along. The most powerful thing anyone can do is protect someone who cannot protect themselves. The most important thing anyone can give is their voice to those who have none. And the greatest legacy anyone can leave is not wealth or fame or success, but the knowledge that because they lived, because they cared, because they refused to give up someone else's life was better. Rosetta Williams had that legacy now, and it was worth more than all the penthouses in Manhattan. As the sun set over the Connecticut hills, casting golden light across the yard where Mason played, Rosetta made one final promise. She would never stop fighting. She would never stop speaking. She would never stop believing that one person with enough courage and enough heart could change the world, because she had proven it was true. And that proof would live on in Mason's straight spine and Destiny's healing hands, in the thousands of children helped by the Williams Initiative, and in the simple, unshakable truth that love, when it is brave enough to act, always wins. That is the measure of a person. That is the measure of Rosetta Williams. And that is the measure of every single one of us who chooses in our own small way to make the world a little bit better than we found it. Some things are worth fighting for no matter the price. And some people, ordinary people with extraordinary hearts, are capable of miracles. All they have to do is believe. All they have to do is try. All they have to do is refuse to look away.